Popular history has softened the brutal edges of Ireland's potato famine, reducing it to a simple tale of crop failure and temporary hardship. But the horrifying truth remains largely untold. This was no ordinary food shortage. The Great Hunger exterminated a greater percentage of Ireland's population than any famine in European history. Over 1 million souls starved to death while surrounded by fertile fields bursting with food that was systematically exported under armed British guard as skeletal children collapsed in the muddied streets. This wasn't merely nature's cruelty. It was a man-made catastrophe where well-fed officials watched an entire people perish, where British bureaucrats coldly discussed surplus population, while coffin makers worked overtime to meet demand. The most bitter irony? Relief ships bringing meager aid would pass export vessels laden with Irish grain destined for English tables. The Irish famine story isn't about blighted potatoes. It's about what happens when a population is deemed disposable by its rulers. Before we continue, if these stories resonate with you, I'd be grateful for your engagement. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. It still amazes me how these tales travel across time zones to people settling in for sleep worldwide. Now, let's journey back to 1845 Ireland. Trust me, you'll want to get comfortable for this one. Adjust your pillows, pull up that blanket. We're heading into rough terrain. Imagine waking up in a cramped stone cottage in County Mayo, Western Ireland. This isn't some quaint thatched roof fantasy. It's a single-room mud hovel where peat smoke hangs thick in the air. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof. The packed dirt floor feels cool and damp under your bare feet as you blink awake. Around you, 6 or 7 family members stir on straw pallets, grandparents to infants sharing this cramped space. Morning light filters through the lone window, just a square opening with wooden shutters, no glass. The stone and mud walls glisten with condensation, the thatched roof blackened by years of peat smoke from the ever-burning hearth. Meet Michael Fitzpatrick. At 43, he looks 60, his face carved by hardship. His wife Catherine already kneels by the fire, preparing the day's first meal, boiled potatoes again. Their 4 children, Bridget, Shay, Mary, and little Thomas, stretch and yawn, bracing for another back-breaking day tending their tiny leased plot. Wash your faces, children, Catherine says gently but firmly. Your father needs to be in the fields by sunrise. The Fitzpatricks rent 3 meager acres from an absentee English landlord, a faceless aristocrat collecting rents through his brutal agent, Mr. Harrison. These stony fields barely yield enough potatoes to feed them and pay rent, with almost nothing left for emergencies. Outside, the crisp autumn air carries promise. It's harvest season 1845, and Michael pauses in the doorway, surveying their potato plants standing tall and green. It'll be a fine harvest this year, he murmurs, more to himself than anyone. God willing. He has no idea this harvest will defy all expectations, and not in the way he hopes. The humble potato wasn't native to Ireland. Explorers brought it from the Americas in the late 1500s. By the 1840s, one particular variety called the Irish lumper had become the rural poor's lifeline, a high-yielding, resilient potato that thrived in Ireland's poor soil and wet climate. A single acre could feed a family of 6 for a year. For tenant farmers, it was nothing short of miraculous, easy to grow, nutritious, and capable of sustaining life where other crops failed. An average adult consumed about 12 pounds daily, children somewhat less. This wasn't by choice. British landowners found it more profitable to use prime Irish land for grain and livestock exports, forcing peasants onto marginal plots where only potatoes could survive. As Michael works his field that morning, he's unaware that across the Atlantic, a microscopic killer called Phytophthora infestans has already devastated North American crops and now drifts toward Europe on the winds. The Fitzpatrick's village clusters in a valley between rolling hills, stone cottages huddled like frightened sheep. From their door, they can see the manor house where the land agent lives, and beyond it, the vast estate of their unseen English landlord, land most villagers have never walked. That morning, Michael and 12-year-old Shay inspect the potato plants at the field's edge. The plants look strong this year, Michael says, running calloused fingers along a leaf. We'll start digging in a few weeks. Shay nods solemnly. He understands their survival hinges on this harvest. Will we have enough for rent and winter food, duh? Michael ruffles his son's hair. And maybe extra besides. But secretly he worries. Rents have tripled in a decade, while their leased land has shrunk. Across Ireland, nearly half the population depends entirely on potatoes. The British government treats Ireland as a colonial breadbasket, extracting grain and livestock wealth while the Irish subsist on tubers. As they return for midday meal, the village priest Father O'Malley approaches urgently. Michael, have you heard the Dublin news? Michael shakes his head. News travels slowly to remote Mayo. There's talk of a potato disease in the east, plants turning black and rotting in fields. They're calling it the blight. Father O'Malley's voice drops, but can't mask his fear. Michael feels icy dread. Has it reached Mayo? Not that I've heard, but whole fields are ruined in Wexford and Wicklow. That evening by their meager fire, Michael shares the news. Catherine crosses herself. God protect us, she whispers. What would we do without the potatoes? The unspoken answer hangs heavy. Without potatoes, they have nothing. No food, no rent money, no seed for next year. Nothing. 2 anxious weeks pass. The Fitzpatricks maintain their dawn-to-dusk routine, but now with constant glances at their field. Then one September morning, Michael spots dark spots on leaves at the field's eastern edge. By afternoon, those plants have withered, leaves black as if scorched. He digs up a potato, normal outside, but inside, dark, slimy, reeking of rot. Catherine. His voice cracks. She runs from the cottage, sees his face, and knows. The blight. Michael shows the rotted potato. It's here. Word spreads like wildfire through the village. By sunset, multiple families report the same black spots. Father O'Malley organizes a prayer vigil. Villagers gather in the small stone church, faces lit by flickering candles as they beg divine intervention. Let this cup pass from us, O Lord, Father O'Malley intones. Spare our crops, spare our children from hunger. But prayers can't stop the wind-borne spores. Within days, every field in the village is infected. The Fitzpatricks watch helplessly as their entire livelihood, next year's food, their rent payment, their very survival, turns black and rots before their eyes. The black rot spreads through County Mayo like a thief in the night, creeping from plant to plant with terrifying speed. What began as a few suspicious spots becomes an unstoppable tide of decay, turning entire fields into putrid wastelands within days. The Fitzpatricks stand helpless before nature's wrath, watching their life's work dissolve into blackened sludge between their fingers. That sickly sweet stench of rotting potatoes, once the comforting aroma of survival, now hangs over the village like a funeral shroud. By October's end, nearly half of Ireland's potato crop lies destroyed. Reports of impending famine reach London, but the response remains tepid. After all, potato failures happened before, in 1739, 1801, and Ireland survived. Surely this is just another temporary setback? Prime Minister Sir Robert Peel takes cautious action, secretly purchasing £100,000 worth of American corn as emergency relief. But he keeps this move quiet, terrified of disrupting markets or creating dependency. For the Fitzpatricks and their neighbors, this distant political maneuvering means nothing as they desperately salvage what few potatoes remain edible. Some mix nettles and wild plants with their dwindling stores, stretching each meal further. Market day reveals the cruelest irony. Carts laden with Irish grain roll toward the coast under armed British escort, destined for English tables while Irish children starve. Our children go hungry while ships stuffed with our own food sail for England. An old man mutters beside Michael. The injustice burns, but what can they do? The grain belongs to landlords, grown by hired laborers on land that once fed communities. Any interference meets rifle butts and batons. Winter arrives like a hammer blow. The Fitzpatricks exhaust their meager savings buying meal at inflated prices. Catherine waters down their food until it's barely more than warm broth. The children's cheekbones grow sharper each day. Shay, now 12, offers to seek work in town. I'm strong, duh. Maybe the docks or warehouses. Michael shakes his head. Hundreds already beg for work, turned away daily. He doesn't mention the darker rumors. Landlords preparing mass evictions for those who can't pay rent. The winter of 1845 to 46 carves its misery into their bones. Snow blankets the rotting potato fields as the family huddles around their feeble fire. Meals shrink until they're eating just once daily. Little Thomas cries from hunger pains while Mary's eyes lose their childhood sparkle. The older children sneak portions to their siblings when parents aren't looking, silent sacrifices that break Michael's heart. News comes of government relief programs, public works projects building roads and bridges where men can earn pennies for backbreaking labor. None reach remote Mayo yet. In January, Father O'Malley brings hope. A relief committee distributes American cornmeal at reduced prices. Michael sets out before dawn for the grueling trek to town. A journey that once took hours now consumes a day as hunger saps his strength. The distribution center swarms with hundreds of desperate souls. British soldiers stand guard, faces impassive as the starving masses press forward. After hours in the biting cold, Michael hands over precious coins for a sack of strange yellow meal. "How do we cook it?" he asks the clerk. "Not my problem," comes the indifferent reply. The walk home with his heavy burden nearly breaks him. Catherine meets him at the door, relief washing over her face. The children cluster around as she attempts to prepare the unfamiliar cornmeal, mixing it like oatmeal, but it becomes a gluey, nearly ineatable paste. They gag it down anyway. Hunger leaves no room for complaints. Unknown to them, this American corn requires special preparation, grinding and soaking they don't understand. Many Irish will sicken from improperly prepared meal, adding illness to starvation. Spring brings fragile hope. Planting time arrives. Surely last year's blight was a fluke? Michael carefully saves the healthiest-looking potatoes for seed, planting them with whispered prayers. Across Ireland, farmers do the same, clinging to hope that this year will be different. For weeks, it seems prayers are answered. Green shoots emerge, growing strong and vibrant. The Fitzpatricks dare to believe they might survive after all. Then July 1846 delivers its cruel twist. Weeks of unrelenting rain and unseasonable cold create perfect conditions for the blight's return. It had never truly left, just lurked in the soil, waiting. This time, it doesn't take half the crop. It takes nearly everything. Fields lush and green one morning become blackened ruins by dusk. Michael stands in his ruined field, rain soaking through his threadbare coat, and weeps openly for the first time in his life. This is no longer a bad season. It's catastrophe. Catherine finds him there, placing a hand on his shaking shoulders. "What will we do, Michael?" Her whisper barely carries over the rain. He has no answer. The few potatoes they've salvaged might last a week. Rent comes due in a month. Winter looms like a death sentence. That night, as children sleep fitfully, Michael and Catherine whisper desperate plans by dying embers. "We could try for Dublin," Catherine suggests. "They say there's more work there, more relief." Michael shakes his head. "How would we get there? We've no money for passage, and the children couldn't walk that far." A pause, then the unthinkable. "There's America." Catherine's eyes widen. America? The word feels impossibly distant. "But Cousin Patrick wrote from Boston last year." Michael continues. "Said a willing man can make a decent living there." The silence stretches as they contemplate this unimaginable step, leaving everything they know, crossing an ocean, maybe dying in the attempt. But staying means slower, more certain death. As summer fades to autumn, the full horror becomes clear. Ireland faces near-total potato failure for the second straight year. Food prices skyrocket beyond reach. Workhouses overflow with the destitute. In London, political winds shift. Peel's government falls, replaced by Lord John Russell's Whigs. The new administration, influenced by laissez-faire economic dogma, believes free markets will correct the shortage. They dismantle Peel's relief measures, arguing they create dependency. For the Fitzpatricks and millions like them, this political change has one meaning: you're on your own. Autumn 1846 descends upon Mayo like a slow-acting poison. The Fitzpatricks ration their last salvage potatoes, mixing them with foraged mushrooms and bitter wild greens that leave their mouths puckered. Catherine sells their few valuables: her mother's copper pot, a woolen shawl passed down 3 generations, for handfuls of meal that barely dent their hunger. Each morning, Michael walks through the village with heavier steps, noting new absences. The Murphy family's cottage stands empty, the Donnellys' hearth lies cold. Market day reveals fresh horrors. British soldiers now escort every grain shipment, bayonets glinting as hollow-eyed villagers watch their harvest depart. Michael witnesses a stone thrown at a provision cart. The response is immediate. Rifle butts crash down on the protester until his blood stains the mud. No one moves to help as the soldiers drag him away. "Best look elsewhere," a shopkeeper mutters to Michael. They're arresting anyone near the shipments now. The workhouse rumors prove true. When Michael ventures to Castle Bar, he finds hundreds camped outside the grim stone building, skeletal figures wrapped in rags, waiting for death or admission. Through open gates, he glimpses the lucky ones inside. Children with bellies swollen from hunger, their cries thin as seagulls against the clanging workhouse bell. The air smells of unwashed bodies and despair. Back home, Catherine makes her own grim discovery. Their milk cow, their last valuable possession, has vanished overnight. The frayed rope suggests theft by neighbors equally desperate. Michael can't summon anger, only a hollow understanding. In the churchyard, fresh mounds appear weekly. Patrick O'Brien, just Thomas's age, lies beneath a crude wooden cross. His mother has disappeared, likely fled toward Dublin with her remaining children. That night, Michael makes his decision at the fire's edge. "We're leaving," he tells Catherine's questioning gaze. "As soon as we can gather what's needed." "Where?" comes Shay's small voice. Michael meets Catherine's eyes. "America. Your mother's brother is in Boston. He might help us." The word hangs between them, America. A land so distant it might as well be the moon. Bridget whispers it like a prayer, testing its weight. At 14, she understands the finality. No coming back, no visiting graves, no standing on soil their ancestors had worked for centuries. But first, they need passage money. £5 per person for steerage, an impossible £30 for 6. Michael's plan takes shape at dawn. He'll offer their tenancy surrender in exchange for transport. It's become common, landlords finding eviction cheaper than chasing destitute tenants. Mr. Harrison receives Michael in the manor's stuffy parlor, surprise flickering across his pinched face. "You've until month's end for rent," he begins automatically. "I've a proposal," Michael interrupts, voice steadier than he feels. "We'll surrender our tenancy voluntarily for passage to America." Harrison's quill pauses over his ledger. The silence stretches as he calculates. Removing an entire family permanently solves multiple problems. "I'll consult the landlord," he finally says. "But if approved, it would be steerage to Canada, not America. Take it or leave it." Canada isn't Boston, but it's a lifeline. Michael nods, the words "thank you" ash in his mouth. Walking home, he's torn between relief and grief. Relief at possibly saving his family. Grief for the land that nurtured generations of Fitzpatricks now lost to him forever. Preparations begin in secret. They'll take only what they can carry. Catherine's wedding crucifix, Michael's father's pocket knife, the children's birth records stitched into Catherine's underskirt. Each item chosen represents a painful abandonment. The spinning wheel that fed them must stay. The stool Michael carved for Catherine's mother left behind. The village learns their plans quickly. Mrs. Connolly brings a sack of oats for the journey, her eyes avoiding theirs. Old man Riley presses a shilling into Thomas's hand when he thinks no one sees. Even Harrison's agent, collecting their final rent, seems subdued as he stamps their papers. Their last night in the cottage plays out in surreal stillness. Neighbors come bearing gifts more precious than gold now. A twist of tea leaves, a knitted scarf, a carved wooden horse for Thomas. Father O'Malley arrives at dusk to bless them, his usually booming voice reduced to a whisper. "May God watch over your crossing," he murmurs, making the sign of the cross over each bowed head. When only family remains, they sit circled around their dying fire, the last they'll ever share in this home. Mary, just 9, asks the question they've all avoided. "Will we ever come back, duh?" Michael meets Catherine's gaze over the children's heads. "Perhaps to visit," he lies gently. "But America's our home now." The word tastes foreign. America. Thomas repeats it like a new prayer, his child's mind already releasing Ireland's hold. Dawn comes gray and drizzly on departure day. Catherine has washed and mended their clothes as best she can. They'll arrive in the new world with dignity, if nothing else. The cart arrives mid-morning, driven by a sullen man who helps load their pitiful bundles without speaking. The children climb aboard silently, suddenly understanding this is no market day trip. Catherine lingers in the doorway, memorizing every smoke-blackened beam, every worn stone her children took their first steps upon. The hearth where she cooked 1,000 meals, the corner where each child was born, the walls that sheltered them through storms literal and metaphorical. "Come, Catherine," Michael calls softly from the cart. She touches the doorframe once, then joins her family without looking back. As they roll down the lane, neighbors emerge silently, hands raised not in celebration, but in solemn farewell. No words are exchanged. What could possibly be said? The cart passes the blighted fields, the churchyard with its fresh graves, the landmarks of their lives shrinking behind them. Each turn of the wheels carries them further from all they've known. Cork Harbor awaits, then a ship, then an ocean, then uncertainty. Behind them, Ireland continues its death spiral. The winter of 1846 is just the beginning. What comes next will etch itself into history as Black 47, the famine's darkest chapter where death reaches its gruesome peak. Workhouses will overflow, roads will litter with corpses, and entire villages will vanish. But for now, the Fitzpatricks have only the road ahead, the creaking cart beneath them, and the desperate hope that somewhere across the Atlantic lies survival. As the cart crests the final hill, Michael whispers a prayer for Ireland, not the land that failed them, but the people left to face the coming storm. Then the hill descends, and home vanishes from view forever. Cork Harbor in February 1847 stinks of fish guts and human desperation. The Fitzpatrick's cart rolls past lines of skeletal figures begging near the docks, their outstretched hands trembling like aspen leaves in the harbor wind. The children press closer together as a wailing woman stumbles past, clutching a limp infant to her chest. There, the cart driver grunts, pointing to a 3-masted ship with peeling paint, the Wanderer. Its gangplank teems with ragged families boarding under the watchful eyes of sailors. Michael's stomach tightens. This floating wooden box must carry them safely across an ocean. Disembarking procedures are chaotic. A port official barely glances at their papers before barking, "Wanderer steerage, over there," toward a growing crowd of hollow-eyed passengers. As they join the queue, Michael notices a well-dressed man observing from a warehouse doorway, scribbling notes. Some English newspaper writer, mutters a fellow passenger. "Come to gawk at the starving Irish." The observer is actually Nicholas Cummins, a magistrate documenting famine conditions. His eventual report to the London Times will describe scenes no tongue or pen can convey. 6 living skeletons huddled under a horse blanket, their legs naked above the knees. But today, he simply watches as the Fitzpatricks shuffle forward. A sudden commotion erupts nearby. A family is being turned away from another ship. "But we paid," the father shouts, waving papers. "These tickets are counterfeit," the officer snaps. The mother collapses weeping as her children cling to her skirts. Michael grips Catherine's hand tighter. That could have been them. Boarding the Wanderer feels like descending into Hades. The steerage compartment stinks of vomit, unwashed bodies, and the reek of the ship's own bilge water. Lanterns sway from low beams, casting eerie shadows on wooden platforms serving as communal bunks. "We'll manage," Michael lies as they claim a 6-foot space on a platform. Catherine immediately begins organizing, spreading their blankets. tucking precious items beneath their sleeping area. Around them, other families do the same, marking territories in this floating slum. That first night, the ship's groans keep the children awake. Is the boat breaking? Mary whispers as timbers creak alarmingly. Just talking to the waves. Michael soothes, though his own knuckles are white on the platform edge. Dawn brings their first grim discovery. The communal waste buckets have overflowed overnight. The stench mingles with the smell of boiling oatmeal from the galley. Catherine wrinkles her nose, but says nothing as she portions out their meager breakfast. By week's end, patterns emerge. Mornings allow brief deck visits in rotating groups, precious minutes of fresh air. The rest is spent below in the reeking darkness, where coughing spreads like wildfire. Old Mrs. Riley from their village dies first, her body sewn into canvas and slipped overboard at dawn. Then the Donahue twins, barely 3 years old. Michael trades Catherine's silver cross to a sailor for extra deck time for Thomas, whose cough worries them. The bribe works. Each sunset, they sneak topside where the salt air seems to ease his breathing. One moonless night, screams pierce the darkness. A young woman, Eileen Kelly, goes into labor amid the heaving waves. Catherine rushes to help as two experienced mothers guide the delivery. After 20 agonizing hours, a red-faced boy emerges squalling into the ship's lantern light. Strong lungs on this one. Catherine smiles, cleaning the infant with their precious water ration. When Eileen names him Michael in gratitude, the Fitzpatrick section of the platform actually cheers, a rare moment of joy in this floating purgatory. 5 weeks in, Newfoundland appears on the horizon. Passengers weep at the sight of land, even this foreign shore. The worst is behind us, Michael tells his family that night. He's tragically mistaken. 2 days later, a sailor spots angry red spots on a passenger's face. The diagnosis spreads faster than the disease itself. Typhus has come aboard. Captain Barton, to his credit, doesn't hide the outbreak as some captains do. When the Wanderer approaches Grosse Île quarantine station, he orders the yellow fever flag raised honestly. The island's white buildings grow clearer as they anchor, along with dozens of other ships already waiting, their own yellow flags flapping in the wind. Quarantine proves agonizingly slow. 3 days pass before inspectors board the Wanderer. Their examination is shockingly brief, just a harried doctor calling. Anyone with fever or rash, step forward. The Fitzpatricks watch in horror as neighbors are marked for hospital transfer. That night, Thomas develops a high fever. Hide it, Michael's first instinct whispers. Families separated at Grosse Île often never reunite. But Catherine won't gamble with their son's life. Next morning, she steps forward with Thomas burning in her arms. My boy needs the hospital. The doctor checks Thomas's rash. Early stage typhus. He goes to the island. I'm coming too, Catherine states, leaving no room for argument. The doctor hesitates. Hospital space is precious, but nods. You alone. The rest stay aboard. As the transfer boat pulls away, Michael shouts after them. We'll meet in Quebec. The wind steals his words, but Catherine seems to understand, clutching Thomas with one hand while waving with the other until the boat disappears around a headland. The hospital on Grosse Île smells of death and lye soap, a nauseating combination that makes Catherine's empty stomach heave as she carries Thomas through its crowded wards. What was meant to be a quarantine facility for hundreds now crams in thousands. Rows upon rows of cots spaced barely a foot apart, each occupied by feverish patients whose moans create a constant, low hum. Here, says an exhausted nurse, pointing to a cot already shared by a semi-conscious girl. You'll have to make room. Catherine lays Thomas beside the girl, whose shallow breathing suggests she won't last the night. She then kneels on the damp floorboards, prepared to keep vigil. Around them, the hospital's horrors unfold. Orderlies carrying out bodies wrapped in soiled sheets. Doctors moving from bed to bed with increasing despair. Nurses collapsing at their posts from exhaustion and infection. Through the long night, Catherine wipes Thomas's burning forehead with vinegar water, singing every lullaby she knows to compete with the ward's cacophony. By dawn, the girl beside Thomas has died. Before the body grows cold, Another child takes her place, a boy no older than Shay, his face already blotched with the telltale rash. Days blur into a nightmare routine. Catherine learns to snatch sleep in 5-minute increments between Thomas's fever spikes. She bribes an orderly with her last hairpin for extra blankets, trades her shawl for a precious orange to squeeze juice between Thomas's cracked lips. The hospital's Protestant chaplain eyes her rosary beads with disapproval, but says nothing when she continues her whispered Hail Marys. Meanwhile, aboard the Wanderer, Michael and the remaining children wait in agonizing limbo. The ship remains anchored offshore, neither permitted to proceed to Quebec nor ordered away. Typhus continues claiming lives. 6 more burials at sea, their first day apart from Catherine and Thomas. Shaq, now the man of their little group, surprises Michael with his quiet strength. At mealtimes, he secretly gives portions to Mary, claiming he's not hungry. At night, he tells Bridget stories of Boston until she falls asleep. Michael watches his son's transformation with pride and sorrow. No 12-year-old should bear such burdens. After a week of waiting, a quarantine officer finally brings news. Your wife and son are registered at the hospital. Boy's condition improving. The words nearly buckle Michael's knees with relief. You'll proceed to Quebec today, the officer continues. There's a boarding house near the docks where separated families wait. The decision tears at Michael. How can he leave without Catherine and Thomas? But the officer insists they'll follow when cleared. Better your children reach solid ground. The journey to Quebec City feels interminable. The children press against the rail as the St. Lawrence River narrows, hoping for a first glimpse of their new world. Instead of the bustling port they imagined, they find a city overwhelmed by famine ships. Dozens of vessels clog the river, their yellow quarantine flags flapping like surrender banners. The boarding house proves to be a converted warehouse where blankets hung from ropes create makeshift walls. A harried French-Canadian woman assigns them a 6-foot square space near a drafty window. 5 cents per night, children half price, she says in broken English. No cooking fires. Each morning, Michael takes the children to the docks, scanning every arriving boat from Grosse Île. Each evening, they return to their pallet, their hope a little dimmer. The warehouse shelters 24 other separated families, their stories haunting the shadows. A Donegal man whose wife died in quarantine, a Carey woman whose baby was taken to a Catholic orphanage temporarily, a teenage boy traveling alone after burying both parents at sea. On the 14th day, as Michael prepares yet another meager supper of hardtack and dried fish, Shaq suddenly bolts upright. Duh? The Mary Catherine just docked. They race through drizzling rain to the wharf, where a coastal steamer discharges its passengers. And there, amid the crowd, stands Catherine, thinner, older, but alive, holding Thomas's hand. The boy still looks frail, but his eyes are clear, his steps steady. The reunion leaves them all weeping and laughing at once. Thomas babbles about angry nuns who made him drink terrible medicine, while Catherine describes their release papers signed just yesterday. As they walk back to the warehouse, arms entwined, Michael realizes this is the first time since leaving Ireland that all 6 Fitzpatricks stand on solid ground together. Quebec in May 1847 teems with both opportunity and danger. Irish immigrants crowd into fetid cellars and abandoned buildings, competing for the most backbreaking jobs. Signs in shop windows proclaim, "No Irish need apply," while newspapers print cartoons depicting Irish as ape-like carriers of disease. Yet kindness exists too. A Catholic priest directs them to a parish soup kitchen. A French-Canadian farmer pays Michael fair wages for a week's haying. Most importantly, Catherine's brother Patrick writes from Boston. He's secured Michael dock work and Catherine laundry clients if they can make the journey south. Their savings grow slowly but steadily. Michael takes any work, unloading ships, digging privies, clearing rubble. Catherine washes laundry in icy river water until her hands crack and bleed. Even Bridget, at 14, finds work minding children for a shopkeeper's wife. By June, they've saved enough for steamer passage to Boston. On their last night in Quebec, their boarding house neighbors surprise them with farewell gifts, a knitted scarf, a tin whistle, a small crucifix. "For remembrance," says Mrs. O'Leary from Cork, pressing the crucifix into Catherine's palm. The steamer to Boston feels luxurious compared to the Wanderer. Real bunks, regular meals, even a deck for fresh air. As the ship enters Boston Harbor on a sparkling July morning, the Fitzpatricks cluster at the rail, their eyes wide. There, Catherine suddenly points to a figure waving madly from the dock. Even after 7 years, she'd recognize her brother Patrick anywhere. "Welcome to America," he says through tears as they disembark. The words sound like a prayer, a promise, a new beginning. Boston in July 1847 assaults the Fitzpatrick senses. The salt-tinged harbor wind carrying shouts of fishmongers, the clatter of horse-drawn omnibuses on cobblestones, the dizzying stench of tanneries and slaughterhouses mingling with fresh-baked bread from Italian bakeries. Patrick, Catherine's brother, looks both familiar and foreign, his Irish accent now laced with American vowels as he shepherds them through the chaotic North End streets. "Mind your step," Patrick warns as they dodge chamber pots being emptied from tenement windows. The children gawk at buildings taller than any in Mayo, at Negro chimney sweeps and Chinese peddlers shouting in tongues they've never heard. Their new home is a single rented room above a chandler's shop, 12 feet square, its plaster walls stained with damp, but theirs alone. A luxury after months of shared spaces. Patrick has furnished it with cast-offs, a straw mattress, a three-legged table, a cast-iron pot hanging over a tiny hearth. Temporary, he promises, though they all know better. Work begins immediately. By dawn next morning, Michael and Patrick join the swarm of laborers at the docks. The foreman, a thick-necked German named Bauer, eyes Michael's gaunt frame skeptically. "Can you lift a 100-pound sack without collapsing, Patty?" Michael meets his gaze. "Try me." The work is brutal. 12-hour shifts unloading salt cod barrels that leave his hands bleeding, cotton bales that coat his lungs in dust. But the pay, $1.25 a day, feels like a fortune. At sunset, he staggers home to find Catherine already boiling laundry in their room, steam curling around Bridget scrubbing shirts on a washboard. "You'll ruin your hands," Michael murmurs, seeing her raw knuckles. Catherine shrugs. Mrs. O'Rourke pays 8 cents per dozen pieces. "We'll manage." By week's end, patterns emerge. Shawn, despite being underage, sneaks onto construction sites carrying bricks for half pay. Bridget minds children for neighborhood mothers. Even Mary, at 9, earns pennies stitching artificial flowers in a sweatshop where Irish girls cough blood from thread-inhaled lungs. Only Thomas remains exempt, though he proudly announces he'll be a newsie, selling papers once he learns to read. The North End's Irish community becomes their lifeline. Mrs. Donovan next door teaches Catherine which shops extend credit to Famine Irish. Old Mr. Flaherty at the corner pub warns which landlords cheat on wages. At Mass each Sunday, the Fitzpatricks hear job leads and gossip in equal measure. Who's hiring? Which streets to avoid after dark? How to navigate the labyrinth of American prejudice. Prejudice proves constant. Newspaper cartoons depict Irish as drunken apes. Shopkeepers overcharge thick-accented patties. Protestant street gangs target Catholic children walking to school. One August evening, Michael comes home with his shirt torn, blood crusting his eyebrow. Beaten for taking honest work from real Americans. Catherine tends his wounds silently, but that night Michael hears her muffled sobs. He strokes her hair until dawn, both pretending not to notice. Autumn brings both hardship and unexpected grace. When Thomas develops a fever, a terrifying echo of Grosse Île, the parish priest sends a nun who administers willow bark tea. When Shawn is cheated of a week's wages, Patrick and 3 dock workers persuade the foreman to pay. And when Catherine falls ill from exhaustion, their neighbor Mrs. Giuliani, an Italian Catholic, brings minestrone that somehow tastes like home. By winter, they've saved enough for a 2-room apartment near the docks. It's damp and rat-infested, but boasts a real stove and space for the children to sleep separate from their parents. On Christmas Eve, Michael surprises them with oranges and a string of cranberries, extravagances that make Mary weep with joy. 1848 arrives with cautious hope. Michael gets promoted to cargo checker. Less lifting, more responsibility. Catherine's laundry business grows enough to hire an orphan girl as helper. Shawn, now 14, begins apprenticing with a carpenter who praises his mathematical hands. Even Thomas starts at a parish school, where nuns teach him to cross himself without spilling the inkwell. Yet Ireland remains ever present. Letters from surviving relatives describe continued starvation, mass evictions, villages erased from maps. Newspapers report that over 100,000 Irish have arrived in Boston since 1845, half the city's population. The Know Nothing Party gains power, demanding immigrant restrictions. One March evening, Patrick brings shocking news. They're forming an Irish militia company to protect our own. Michael balks. After what we fled, you take up arms. Patrick's face hardens. Here we fight back. The children absorb this silently. Shawn with interest, Bridget with fear, Mary with confusion. Only Thomas, swinging his legs on the stool, seems untouched. I'm American now, he declares, parroting his teacher's words. We don't have kings. The adults exchange glances. America is reshaping their children in ways both wonderful and terrifying. Spring brings their first real luxury, a daguerreotype portrait. They dress in borrowed finery. Catherine in Mrs. Donovan's lace collar, Michael in Patrick's good coat, the children scrubbed pink. The photographer poses them stiffly, but when the image develops, what shines through is their unbroken spirit, a family forged in famine, tempered by exile, yet still intact. That night, Catherine places the portrait beside her most treasured possession, a handkerchief of Irish soil sewn into her petticoat. For the children to know where we came from, she explains when Michael raises an eyebrow. He kisses her forehead, thinking of the stone cottage now likely collapsed, the village dispersed, the fields gone to scrub. But here, in this cramped Boston apartment smelling of lye soap and baking bread, something new has taken root. The summer of 1848 arrives in Boston like a fever, thick, humid air pressing down on the crowded North End streets where Irish immigrants jostle for space. The Fitzpatrick's apartment becomes an oven by mid-morning, the heat amplifying the stench of uncollected garbage and open sewers. Catherine keeps wet cloths draped over the windowsills, but nothing stops the flies from swarming around the laundry she irons for wealthier clients. Michael comes home one July evening with blistered hands and news that electrifies the household. They're building a railroad west, paying top dollar for strong backs. Shaw's eyes light up. At 15, he's grown nearly to his father's height, his carpenter's muscles hardening from daily work. Could we go? Catherine's iron hovers over a petticoat. The unspoken question hangs. Should they uproot again so soon? Patrick settles the matter when he visits that Sunday, his forearms covered in shipyard grease. The railroad's hiring Irish, but the work camps are death traps, typhoid, cholera, accidents. He leans in. I've better news. The mercantile wharf needs permanent dock checkers. Steady wages, no traveling. Michael accepts the position the next day, though it means swallowing daily insults from Yankee merchants who call him Patty and pretend not to understand his accent. His promotion marks a turning point. For the first time since leaving Ireland, the Fitzpatricks have predictable income. Bridget, now 16, makes her own leap that summer, a full-time position at Madame Thibodeau's dress shop. The French modiste initially balks at hiring an Irish peasant, but Bridget's flawless stitching wins her over. Soon she's learning French phrases and bringing home discarded fabric scraps that Catherine transforms into hair ribbons for Mary. Mary herself, at 11, becomes the family's first true scholar. The parish school nuns recognize her quick mind, drilling her in arithmetic and elocution to overcome her origins. She comes home one afternoon reciting Longfellow, her brogue deliberately softened, a change that makes Michael frown, but Catherine secretly applauds. Only Thomas struggles to find his place. Small for his 9 years, he tires easily, a lingering effect of the typhus. When neighborhood boys taunt him for being slow, Shawn teaches him to fight back, not with fists but words. Tell them you're Boston-born, he advises. though Thomas arrived mere months before his first birthday. The ruse works. Soon Thomas struts with local pride, his accent more American than Irish. The political winds shift violently that fall. Anti-Irish riots erupt when the Know-Nothings burn a Charlestown convent, claiming the nuns imprisoned Protestant girls. Michael joins the newly formed Irish militia on patrols, though he refuses to carry anything heavier than a walking stick. "We didn't escape British guns to play soldier here," he tells Patrick, who's become a lieutenant. Their greatest test comes on election day, when nativists blockade polling stations to prevent Irish voting. Patrick's militia company forms a human corridor through the jeering crowds, allowing immigrants to reach the ballot boxes. Michael, shielding elderly voters, takes a brick to the shoulder, an injury that leaves him bedridden for a week but earns unexpected respect from Yankee neighbors who witnessed his restraint. "You've changed," Catherine murmurs as she changes his bandages. Michael watches candlelight play across her careworn face, still beautiful to him, though famine and exile have etched premature lines around her eyes. "We both have." Winter brings an unexpected blessing, their first Christmas tree. Bridget's French employer explains the German tradition, and Shaw constructs a miniature pine on their table, decorated with foil stars from tea packages. They can't afford candles, but Mary strings cranberries while Thomas carves a tiny wooden angel to crown it. The holiday feast is meager by Yankee standards: a scrawny chicken, potatoes, carefully inspected for blight, and an American pudding Catherine improvises from stale bread and dried apples. But when Patrick produces a bottle of real whiskey, the adults toast to survival as the children marvel at their first ever store-bought candies. 1849 dawns with both promise and peril. Gold fever sweeps Boston as news from California reaches the docks. Patrick considers joining the rush, but Michael refuses outright. "We've our own gold right here," he says, gesturing to the children doing homework at the table. Shaw, however, begins disappearing on weekends, returning with blistered hands and mysterious pay. It takes Catherine's sharp eyes to notice the telltale yellow dust in his boot seams. "You're working the assay office," she accuses. Shaw grins, unrepentant. They pay extra for Irish lads willing to handle mercury. The dangerous work separating gold from ore pays triple dock wages, money he secretly saves toward opening his own carpentry shop. Bridget too nurses secret ambitions. When Madame Thibodeau falls ill, Bridget manages the shop alone for a month, discovering a knack for business. She starts teaching Mary fancy embroidery, whispering that such skills might one day earn them a place among the lace-curtain Irish in the South End. Their upward mobility draws mixed reactions. Some neighbors cheer their success, others mutter about uppity patties. When Michael buys Catherine a proper washtub with copper fittings, Mrs. Donovan next door sniffs that they're forgetting their station. The tension erupts one April evening when nativist thugs attack Irish homes. The Fitzpatricks bar their door as rocks shatter nearby windows, but Shaw slips out to help defend the neighborhood. He returns at dawn with a split lip and fierce pride, having helped put out fires and carried an injured child to safety. "You're becoming an American," Patrick observes wryly. Shaw meets his father's gaze. "No, I'm becoming an Irishman who won't be cowed." The statement lingers in the room like pipe smoke. Michael realizes with a start that his children are forging an identity he barely understands. Not quite Irish, not yet American, but something new entirely. That summer, as cholera sweeps through the immigrant slums, the Fitzpatricks miraculously stay healthy. Catherine attributes it to cleanliness, boiling their water, scrubbing floors with vinegar, but neighbors whisper about the protective herbs she hangs by their door, a remnant of Irish folkways she can't quite abandon. By autumn, their savings reach an unimaginable sum, $200. Enough for first and last month's rent on a proper 3-room apartment near the docks, with space for Shaw to build furniture and Bridget to sew. On moving day, as they carry their meager possessions through the streets, Mary suddenly stops and points. A ship flying British colors glides into harbor, the first they've seen since the Wanderer. The children barely glance at it, but Michael and Catherine stand frozen, remembering another life, another shore. "Come along," Catherine finally says, adjusting her grip on the washtub. We've new rooms to arrange. As they walk away from the waterfront, the past recedes like an outgoing tide, not forgotten, but no longer pulling them under. The future waits in those sunlit rooms, where the scent of fresh paint and sawdust smells like hope. The new apartment on North Street becomes a palace in the Fitzpatrick's eyes. 3 whole rooms with real glass windows and a cast-iron stove that doesn't smoke. On their first night, the children race through the empty space like wild ponies, their laughter bouncing off bare walls until Mrs. O'Malley downstairs bangs her broomstick on the ceiling. Shaw immediately claims the smallest room for his carpentry, fashioning a workbench from scrap wood. By summer's end, he's producing chairs sturdy enough to sell at the dockside market, his first step toward independence. Bridget commandeers the best light by the window for her sewing, her fingers flying as she replicates Madame Thibodeau's latest French designs. Even Mary and Thomas gain their own corner with a real bedstead bought secondhand, though they still fight over the blanket like puppies. 1850 brings seismic shifts to Boston and the Fitzpatricks. The Fugitive Slave Act turns the city into a battleground, with Irish dockworkers caught between abolitionist employers and their own desperate need for work. Patrick becomes embroiled in the conflict when his militia company is hired to guard a captured runaway slave. They're paying us to hold chains, he tells Michael over bitter ale, his face ashen, like the bloody redcoats back home. Michael's hands tighten around his mug. The memory of British soldiers escorting grain carts from starving villages still burns. We won't do it, he declares, and within days, half the Irish militia resigns, a small rebellion that earns them scorn from Yankees and grudging respect from Negro waiters at the dockside taverns. Catherine, meanwhile, navigates her own quiet revolution. Her laundry business expands until she employs 3 girls, 2 Irish, 1 Negro, boiling linens in the backyard while she handles the delicate hand washing for wealthy clients. When the Beacon Hill ladies discover her talent for removing wine stains, her reputation spreads beyond the immigrant community. Mrs. Astor's maid paid me in silver yesterday, she whispers one night, pouring 35 cents into Michael's palm, the first clean American money she's ever earned. The children continue their metamorphosis. Shaw, now 17, courts a printer's daughter, an unheard-of match between an Irish laborer and a Yankee tradesman's child. Bridget's embroidery wins first prize at the mechanics fair, her work displayed alongside Beacon Hill gentlewomen's. Mary shocks everyone by announcing she'll train as a schoolteacher to civilize the next generation of Irish, she says with a primness that makes Thomas snort. Only Thomas remains adrift. At 12, he's too frail for hard labor, but too restless for school. He drifts between odd jobs, newspaper boy, errand runner, occasional assistant to the neighborhood's Italian fruit seller. His saving grace emerges unexpectedly, a beautiful singing voice that earns him pennies at taverns and, eventually, a spot in the church choir. The family's fragile prosperity faces its greatest test when cholera returns in the sweltering summer of 1851. The North End becomes a ghost town as wealthier families flee to the countryside. The Fitzpatricks stay. They have nowhere else to go, but Catherine enforces strict rules. Water boiled twice, vegetables scrubbed with vinegar. No one leaves the house after dark when the night carts come to collect the dead. When Thomas falls ill despite their precautions, it's Bridget who remembers the Italian remedy, garlic poultices and red wine. Catherine prays over him in Gaelic while Michael paces the hallway, their old fears resurfacing. But this time, the crisis passes. By week's end, Thomas sits up demanding food, his recovery celebrated with a precious orange shared 6 ways. The near tragedy changes something fundamental. Michael begins attending night classes to learn bookkeeping, so my children won't break their backs like I did. Catherine starts saving her silver coins in a tea-tin labeled land. Even Patrick softens, trading militia drills for evening school, where he studies the very American history he once scorned. 1852 arrives with unexpected gifts. Shaw secures a loan to open his own carpentry shop, the first Fitzpatrick business. Bridget receives a marriage proposal from a Welsh ship's chandler, though she puts him off, dreaming instead of her own dress shop. Mary wins a scholarship to the normal school, her essays on the immigrant contribution, earning praise from Yankee professors. On St. Patrick's Day, as the first parade in Boston history marches past their windows, the Fitzpatricks host an open house. Yankee neighbors rubbing elbows with Irish laborers, Italian fruit sellers toasting with German beer. Michael watches the unlikely gathering with quiet wonder, remembering the stone cottage where they once huddled around a single potato. That night, as Catherine counts her laundry earnings, she makes a discovery. The tea tin labeled land now holds $87.50. Enough for a down payment on a small house in South Boston, where the air smells of salt instead of sewage. We'll have a garden, she whispers, her eyes shining. And an apple tree, like home. Michael touches the small scar on his forehead, a souvenir from the famine years. It won't be Ireland. No, Catherine agrees, folding his calloused hand in her still rough ones. But it'll be ours. As spring blossoms into summer, the Fitzpatricks stand on the cusp of something unimaginable a decade earlier. Not just survival, but belonging. The children have become strange hybrids, speaking without brogues, but singing rebel songs at family gatherings, excelling in American schools, but cherishing their mother's Irish stories. When they finally visit the South Boston house, a modest clapboard with a cherry tree in the yard, Thomas surprises everyone by climbing to its highest branch and refusing to come down until they promise to buy it. We will, Michael declares, though the price stretches their savings thin. As the real estate agent shakes his hand, something shifts irrevocably. The Fitzpatricks are no longer famine refugees, no longer tenants. For the first time in generations, they'll own the ground beneath their feet. That evening, as they walk back to North Street for the last time, the setting sun paints the harbor gold, the same water that carried them from death to life, from despair to this improbable hope. The South Boston house closes on a crisp October morning in 1852, its clapboard walls glowing amber in the autumn light. As Michael fits the wrought iron key into the lock, the first key he's ever owned, Thomas suddenly darts past him, scrambling up the cherry tree like a squirrel. "Get down, you wild thing," Catherine calls, but she's laughing as the boy showers them with crimson leaves. Their possessions look pathetically small in the empty house. A few crates of clothes, Shaw's carefully disassembled workbench, the daguerreotype portrait wrapped in quilting. Yet as Bridget arranges their meager furniture, the rooms transform. Sunlight spills across wide plank floors Michael will never have to ask permission to sand. The cast iron stove, purchased new from a foundry, stands proudly in a kitchen where no landlord can raise the rent. That first night, they sleep on pallets around the hearth like pioneers, the children's excited whispers echoing through the empty upstairs. Catherine lies awake long after the others drift off, listening to the unfamiliar creaks of their own walls. When an owl hoots outside, she realizes with a start. It's the first birdsong she's heard since leaving Mayo. Settling in becomes its own adventure. Michael discovers a talent for carpentry under Shaw's tutelage, adding bookshelves for Mary's growing collection. Bridget's embroidery frames now decorate the parlor walls, a far cry from the laundry lines of their tenement days. Even Thomas contributes, tending the backyard garden with seeds bartered from Italian neighbors. Their rise doesn't go unnoticed. At Mass one Sunday, the priest announces from the pulpit, "The Fitzpatricks have bought property in South Boston." The congregation erupts in applause. They've become unwitting symbols of Irish possibility. But prosperity brings new complications. Mary's normal school classmates whisper about lace-curtain Irish putting on airs. Shaw's carpentry clients, mostly Yankees, begin questioning why an illiterate Patty charges nearly as much as proper joiners. Worst of all, Patrick drifts away, uncomfortable with their upward mobility. "You're becoming the very landlords we fled," he accuses during one strained visit. The rift deepens when Michael refuses to support an anti-abolitionist Irish political candidate. "We know what it's like to be treated as less than human," he argues at a heated parish meeting. The room divides along generational lines. older immigrants clinging to tribal loyalties, younger ones like Shaw advocating integration. Catherine navigates these tensions through quiet diplomacy. She hosts weekly at homes, where Irish maids and Yankee matrons sip tea from the same china, purchased secondhand but polished to a shine. When the neighborhood children mock Thomas for his lingering frailty, she bakes shortbread for their mothers, a peace offering that gradually earns him acceptance. The winter of 1853 tests their newfound stability. Blizzards bury Boston under 4 feet of snow, collapsing tenement roofs across the North End. Michael organizes a rescue party with Shaw, pulling families from ruined buildings, including the Donovans, their former neighbors. Seeing Mrs. Donovan's chilblained hands as she accepts charity, Catherine understands how thin the line remains between security and disaster. Spring brings reconciliation. Patrick arrives unannounced one April evening, bearing a sapling wrapped in burlap. "Apple tree," he mutters, avoiding Michael's eyes. "Thought you could plant it out back." The brothers work side by side all afternoon, their silence speaking volumes. By sundown, the tree stands straight in the yard, its roots, like theirs, now anchored in this foreign soil. The children continue surpassing expectations. Mary graduates normal school with honors, securing a teaching position at the Quincy School, the first Irish instructor on staff. Bridget's wedding to the Welsh chandler becomes a neighborhood event, her self-designed gown inspiring orders that launch her dressmaking business. Even Thomas, now 14, finds his calling, apprenticing with a piano tuner who praises his golden ear. Only Shaw remains restless. His carpentry shop thrives, but he dreams bigger, reading architectural treatises by lamplight, sketching designs for row houses with indoor plumbing. The Irish will need proper homes as they rise. He explains to Michael, who barely recognizes this ambitious young man as the boy who once starved in Mayo. On the eve of Mary's 21st birthday, the family gathers in their now-furnished parlor. Bridget serves walnut cake on her best china while Thomas plays The Last Rose of Summer on their newly acquired piano. Later, as the others sleep, Michael finds Catherine in the moonlit garden, running Irish soil through her fingers, a handful smuggled in her petticoat all those years ago. "Thinking of home?" he asks softly. She lets the black earth sift away. This is home now. The realization settles over them both. They've crossed some invisible threshold. The famine, the coffin ship, the desperate early years. These remain part of them, but no longer define them. Their children will inherit not just survival, but possibility. When Michael wakes next morning, he finds Catherine already dressed, poring over a catalog of rose bushes. Outside, their apple tree has burst into blossom overnight, a cloud of pink against the blue spring sky. Somewhere beyond the harbor, a ship's bell tolls, but neither of them turns to look. The summer of 1854 blooms around the Fitzpatricks like their own backyard roses, vibrant, unexpected, and hard-won. On Independence Day, they host their first true American celebration, a picnic on the grassy slope behind their house, where South Boston meets the harbor. Bridget arrives with her Welsh husband and their round-cheeked baby, the first Fitzpatrick of the new generation. Shaw brings architectural plans rolled like scrolls, eager to show Michael his latest design, a 6-family tenement with proper ventilation and shared washrooms. Like our own North End apartment, he explains, but cleaner, brighter. Mary, now a respected schoolteacher, reads the Declaration of Independence aloud while Thomas accompanies on the piano hauled outdoors for the occasion. When she reaches, "All men are created equal," Patrick, recently naturalized, wipes his eyes unashamedly. The moment crystallizes something profound. The Fitzpatricks are no longer famine survivors, no longer struggling immigrants. They've become what they once envied, established Americans with a stake in the nation's future. Yet the past remains palpably present. That evening, as fireworks burst over the harbor, Catherine serves potatoes with dinner. Always potatoes, carefully inspected for any dark spots. The children roll their eyes but eat without complaint, understanding this unspoken ritual. Later, when baby Liam fusses, Bridget hums an Irish lullaby learned at her mother's knee. the words half-remembered but the melody achingly familiar. Autumn brings a different kind of harvest. Mary announces her engagement to a second-generation German teacher, a match that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. Shaw breaks ground on his tenement project, employing Irish and Italian laborers at fair wages. Even Thomas, now 16, earns steady income tuning pianos in Beacon Hill parlors where his accent raises eyebrows, but his talent earns respect. The Crimean War sends grain prices soaring, triggering a mild panic in Boston. Michael watches the dockside speculators with grim amusement. These Americans call a 10-cent bread increase a crisis. He quietly stockpiles flour in their cellar, a habit born of famine that Catherine no longer teases him about. When winter comes, it finds them prepared. Their house stands solid against the nor'easters, its new cast-iron radiators piping warmth into every room. On Christmas morning, they exchange proper gifts for the first time in their lives. A cameo brooch for Catherine, leather-bound books for Mary, drafting tools for Shaw. Thomas receives sheet music from Mozart's operas, while Michael unwraps a gold pocket watch engraved to the man who carried us across. The inscription brings unexpected tears. That night, as the household sleeps off Christmas pudding, Michael takes the watch to the backyard. Snow crunches underfoot as he approaches their apple tree, now taller than he is, its branches bare and brittle in the moonlight. Duh! Shaw's voice startles him. His son stands in the doorway, coatless in the cold. Couldn't sleep. Michael lies, slipping the watch into his pocket. Shaw joins him at the tree, their breath mingling in frosty clouds. I've been thinking, when the tenement's finished, we could call it Mayo House. The idea hangs between them, a memorial to a place Shaw barely remembers, a life he narrowly escaped. Michael touches the rough bark, remembering the stone cottage's collapsed walls, the blighted fields, the neighbors who didn't survive. Your mother would like that, he finally says. Time accelerates as it does for the settled and prosperous. 1855 sees Bridget open her own dress shop, its window displaying B. Fitzpatrick, millinery, and fine needlework. Mary marries her German beau in a ceremony blending Celtic knots and Lutheran hymns. Thomas is hired as assistant organist at Trinity Church, a position that would have barred his parents at the door. The tenement project completes in June, its brick facade standing proud amidst South Boston's wooden houses. On opening day, the Fitzpatricks host a party for the Irish and Italian families who'll call it home. As children race through airy hallways and women admire the shared courtyard garden, Shaw pulls Michael aside. Look, he points to the cornerstone where Mayo House 1856 is carved beneath a cluster of shamrocks. For remembrance, the phrase echoes Catherine's words years earlier when she sewed Irish soil into her petticoat. Now, standing before this solid American building named for a lost homeland, Michael understands what they've built is more than wood and brick. It's a bridge between worlds. That night, as he and Catherine prepare for bed in their now quiet house, Thomas being the last child at home, she produces a yellowed envelope from her jewelry box. Inside are 6 faded tickets. Steerage passage from Cork to Quebec, April 1847. Why keep these all these years? Michael asks, tracing the smudged ink. Catherine folds his hand around them. To remember how far we've come. Outside their window, the apple tree rustles in the summer breeze, its branches heavy with fruit that will soon ripen, tart and sweet, like memory itself. Somewhere beyond the harbor, a ship's bell tolls the hour, but neither of them turns to look. The famine, the coffin ship, the desperate early years, these shadows remain, but no longer haunt. The Fitzpatricks have become what America promised, not just survivors, but architects of their own destiny. Their children will inherit not trauma, but possibility, not hunger, but harvest. And when future generations ask how they endured, the answer will live in the sturdy walls of Mayo House, in Bridget's delicate embroidery, in Thomas's music floating through Trinity Church, whispers of resilience carried across an ocean, taking root in foreign soil and blossoming against all odds.